Great to have you. The realestateexperts.com real estate show. We're about to do something that you need to stay for the rest of the show, because if you own investment property, thinking about getting into the investment business, what you're about to hear will be probably the most instructive, most important thing you will hear in ownership of real estate, trusts, LLCs, and trying to keep it all contained so it's not so overwhelming. Joining us now, Scott Smith, Royal Legal Solutions, and we're going to take you through protecting your real estate assets. Hey, Scott, good to have you here.
Hey, great to be here. Thanks.
All right, so, a lot of people call us from the show that are investing in real estate, and there's this competing process. I want to get into the liability shield of owning real estate first. Some people go, I got all these LLCs, I got a number of properties, and I got one in each LLC. Some people just want to put them all in one company and run a property company. As a lawyer who deals with both asset preparation and shielding liability concerns, what is your ultimate recommendation for economy but also legality?
Yeah, so the first thing that I recommend is that everybody have an asset holding company. So but all the assets they have, they shouldn't own anything in their personal name. Owning assets in your personal name is the absolute worst way you can do it. I had a friend who had $3 million in real estate that he lost from a single lawsuit, and he had great insurance in place, but insurance companies are in the business of collecting premiums and denying coverage, and he lost it all. And if he would have just had an LLC, he would have been protected from that lawsuit. And that's why at Royal Legal Solutions, we give the first LLC away for free to anybody that comes in and knocks on the door for us, because we're that serious about it. And what we do with that, too, is to say you need to have an asset holding company that holds all of your assets, and you need a separate company that does all of your active business operations. So that needs to be your shield to the world to say, who you're doing business with, who sends you rent checks. All of that goes to a company that doesn't own anything, but it does all of your contacts with the outside world. And you have a completely separate company, which is either another LLC or a series LLC, that doesn't do anything, but it holds all of your assets.
So, Scott, if you have a holding company that collects all the rent, serves kind of as the landlord, what has been your experience with that company? Let's say there's 10 properties, 100 properties that company's managing on behalf of a series of LLCs, and the tenant decides, well, we got a mold problem or we got this problem, they want to sue, or some party stumbles and falls and wants to sue. Don't they sue the property owner anyway?
Yeah, this is where it becomes really important that you have different shields in place, right? That's why asset protection works in layers. So the number one layer that's most important is compartmentalizing every single asset into the smallest possible chunk. So if you have one LLC that owns 10 pieces of property and you had one tenant get angry and sue because of some type of condition on the property, or say grandma fell through the stairs on the property and they want to sue the property owner, insurance isn't going to cover that. And so what you can do is go after the owner of that property. So if that's an LLC that has 10, pieces of property in it, you can go after all 10 of those pieces of property. If you use a series LLC structure, which is just a more efficient way to be able to compartmentalize every asset than individual LLCs, but with the same protection, you can make it where the most they could ever get is that one property. They could get property A, but they can't go after property B, C, D, et cetera. And that's why a series LLC is so powerful. No matter where you live or what assets you own, you can set it up in either Texas, Delaware, Nevada, or Wyoming that have strong charging order protections. It's very important you set it up in one of those states, and it can own property in any other state. So that's the way to do it, is that you need to shrink down how much money they could come after you for if there was ever that lawsuit.
So if someone individually is the owner, or a couple of folks own an LLC with property in it, Scott, by the way, Scott Smith with us, Royal Legal Solutions, and we're talking about just liability shield of property. If someone were to get sued personally, I don't know, over some unrelated thing or some debt crisis or whatever, as we saw a few years ago, what can those creditors then, if there's a judgment in place, what can they do to get through the corporate veil, if you will, of the LLC structure, since the individual owes money through a judgment, but there's assets in the LLC? Have you had much experience with dealing with that, pushing back on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So having the LLCs in place are what's going to be able to protect you from creditors that that you would owe money to, right? So let's say it's your credit card debt or whatever the case may be. If you own the debt, that's not your LLC's debt. So they could come after you personally, but they can't come after the assets of your LLC very easily. It's very, very difficult to do that. That's one of the great reasons why you have the LLCs put in place. And I got to tell you that all of these protections, whether it's the the creditor type of protection or whether you're looking for protections from lawsuits, all of these only work if the LLC is properly maintained and formed, right? So one of the things that we do is not just focusing on how do we, the quickest, easiest way you can just throw up an LLC, because what we found is people don't actually maintain those correctly, and they don't spend the time to actually craft the operating agreement, establish the bank account for it, and do the other things that you need to do. So what we do at the Royal Legal Solutions is that we're not only setting up the LLCs for people, we're actually actively working with them on how do you make these where they're actually effective. By doing all of the maintenance for them and being able to be that resource where people can trust us to be able to manage all of those affairs for them so they can just focus on investing. We just serve as a resource to do all the legwork for them, as well as be an information source for any questions that they have at any time to just ask us.
I guess one of the things that I've seen over the years, and I think other people probably would agree, is that if you own, as a practice, a number of investment properties, you could end up having 10 or 20 or 30 investment properties each in an individual LLC, which doesn't that create a pretty massive accounting bill at the end of the year in terms of, having to do a tax return on each of those LLCs? How do people manage that kind of volume if they're kind of more mature in investing?
Yeah, so what you would do is the LLCs are the old way of doing it, where you have individual LLCs, one for each property. And the reason that it's the old way is because you have to pay to establish and maintain each one of those different entities. Plus, you have to have a separate bank account, separate EIN number, and in a lot of cases, separate tax returns. So it becomes very, very expensive to have the asset protection. Now with the Series LLC has been around for about 20 years. It's so strong that it's never been challenged. There's no court cases on it. And it's not really at the cutting edge of the law, so to speak. So a lot of people don't know about it. But what it does is it allows you to create one LLC with one EIN number, one bank account, one set of accounting books. And what's special about the Series LLC is that it can create what's called a child series, which acts just like an LLC, but they're free to create. And you don't have to do any of the other pieces, upkeep, maintenance, et cetera, don't apply to the child series of a Series LLC. So then you can infinitely scale absolutely for free with all of the asset protection, just like you were having to create individual LLCs, but without all of the expense.
No.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, is that because that's the IRS rules, or is that because of the states you're doing it in, or is it both? Because I've not heard of that. Yeah,
it's actually both. Yeah, so it's been around for about 20 years. You would always form it in either Delaware, Texas, or Nevada. Or Wyoming. Of those, I like Texas because Texas doesn't have any yearly fees, and it has the same asset protection, strong asset protection laws, which is the charging order protection is the most important of those. And IRS and the states have weighed in on how the Series LLCs are treated for the tax purposes. If you're an individual or a married couple, it's the whole entity is treated like a pass-through entity. So you're able to just have everything reported onto the Schedule E of your personal return, just like as if the entity, didn't exist for the tax purposes there. So it's just a huge amount of cost savings, and it's very easy to use for the accounting. All you do is you just tag the income and expenses inside of your QuickBooks as those that are associated with the Child Series A for one property, and you tag the income and expenses for Child Series B, and that's it. And if you do that, you can have everything run through one bank account. It really simplifies your life as an investor.
So, and help me understand, I think I know, but help me understand why you're saying those four states, Nevada, Delaware, Texas, Wyoming. I've heard this before. What's the difference in those four states and, say, Georgia or Kentucky or Tennessee? What's the advantage there for the investor if they are investing in Georgia, South Carolina, or Florida, for instance?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different factors to why asset protection attorneys like myself that are real estate investors prefer those 4 states. The number one reason is charging order protection. It has to do with somebody's ability to sue you and take your ownership interest inside of your LLC. So, for instance, California provides no protection really, because you can sue an individual and take their ownership interest in the LLC. So then really what's the point of the LLC, right, if you can just go after their stuff anyway? And other states, you'll find that they don't have as lenient protections as they do, say, in Texas, where in Texas, for example, if you screw up on your accounting records or there's a defect in your LLC, in a lot of instances, the courts will just allow you to fix it after the fact, and even after the lawsuit started. You can reestablish the LLC if it went defunct. You can establish accounting records if you can, as long as they're reasonably accurate, to be able to prove that the LLC is properly maintained. So that's why those 4 states are important. It's not just in the protections they give you per the law, but also how able are you to correct things if you screw it up. And that's one of the great things I love about Texas, is because it's very lenient on its ability to help you even if you mess it up.
So if there's a tenant dispute, though, with the properties in, say, Georgia or South Carolina, they're still going to sue in that state, or do they have to sue in Texas to get to the ownership for jurisdiction purposes?
Yeah, so they would be able. They're always able to sue you in that state, right, for wherever you're going to own the property, and then you have to appear in that state to defend yourself, right? So that anytime you have property that's it's real property, you're always going to be able to sue in that locale for it.
All right, Scott, wait. So let's do this, Scott. Let's pause right here. Let's take a quick break, and when we come back, I want to talk about family trusts. Are they safe? Do they protect you? I want to talk about LLCs, the cost. I want to put you on the spot in a minute. I want to get into the cost of actually doing this. The realestateexperts.com real estate show continues. We hope you'll stick around.